John, you've got a really good lot of good videos of William Branham on your website where he just goes back and forth, just contradicting himself over and over and over. You've got some really, really, really good ones on there. And again, it's really no exaggeration to say there is not a single topic that William Branham preached consistently, other than he's important, right? The only consistent topic of William Branham's sermons is William Branham is important, okay? But there's multiple other incompatible versions of literally everything he preached.
Well, I have found one. There is one doctrine that William Branham taught, and actually I'm in agreement with this doctrine, Charles. William Branham taught correctly that the correct way to eat a pancake is to baptize it.
I know we've got some comments on our podcast that we should, people want us to spend time trying to deal with a lot of William Branham's teachings and try to compare them to the Bible and stuff, but it's like, but which version of William Branham's teachings do you analyze, right? The Trinitarian version, the Oneness version, the Arian version, right? Because he preached it all, right? Like, which version of the message do you analyze? And the message doesn't have a statement of faith. There's no universally agreed on way to reconcile all of his conflicting statements. And so there's no way that we could universally deal with the teachings of the message in a way that would help every sect out there, right? No matter which one, no matter how we really tackle his teachings, it's really just going to be one sect, and then all the other sects, well, we don't believe it that way anyway, And they'll say, well, you guys just don't believe the message. No, I mean, we know all the conflicting versions, right? It's way too complicated to try and analyze a mountain of conflicting statements which people have reconciled in all these different crazy ways. And the thing is, most of the feuds and the conflicts that go on in the message, and the whole reason that there are all of these different sects, is because they've all fought each other over how to reconcile all these conflicting statements.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it is. Another thing we did in the message was we would say that William Branham had progressive revelation. You mentioned that at the start. And that the picture gradually got clearer to him over time. And what you have then is, we'd say, then towards the end of his life, that's more accurate, right? And that's how some groups would explain away the conflicting statements. But really, saying that William Branham's sermons were progressive revelation, it actually doesn't really stand up to scrutiny if you analyze it. Because there is progressive revelation in the Bible, right? Like, you could say the Old Testament generally unfolds to reveal the Messiah in the New Testament, right? But you don't find Moses and Isaiah and Jeremiah having to go back and revise their prophecies, right? Right? When something really came from God, it's good and it stays good, right? Progressive revelation that came from God is still timeless, right? And it ages well. But we see that's not what happened with William Branham. William Branham's so-called progressive revelations actually contradicted the earlier revelations, right? His newer revelations require you to throw away the older revelation. So it's not really progressive revelation, right? And that's just a huge red flag, because progressive revelation cannot conflict and contradict earlier revelation.
What I tell people who are in the support groups who are seeking help, it's like a big puzzle. Progressive revelation, Charles, is like a puzzle. If you get this brand new puzzle and you see all of these puzzle pieces that are red, but you don't have the picture on the box to see what it is, you might think, oh, that's a red car. And then you start putting it together and you realize, well, wait a minute, I don't see fenders, I don't see wheels, there's no black for a car. And then you suddenly see there's this, tree, and you think, oh, it must be a red building next to the tree. And then when you continue putting together, you see the tree and you start seeing grass, and suddenly there's this little rim of a lake, and you see the moon shining on the lake and it's red. You get a clearer picture of what's happening, and that's progressive revelation. You have truth that's with more truth, that ends up in a clear picture of the truth. What we have with William Branham is, instead, we have a car, we have a bicycle, we have a truck, we have an airplane, we have all of these things that can't go together, but we're going to try to take a sledgehammer and make those pieces in the puzzle fit, regardless of how different they are.
Mm-hmm. And William Branham never himself actually made any real explanation as to why he did that, like why he preached so many contradictory things. Like, William Branham never explained why he switched from Trinity to oneness, to Trinity again, then back to oneness again, and then back to Arianism again, you know? And then back to oneness at the last. Like, William Branham never explained why he did that. And the progressive revelation idea was invented by the generation of message leaders after William Branham died, right? To try and explain his internal conflicts. William Branham himself never really claimed progressive revelation, right? Like, William Branham never made these claims himself. These are really things that were made after he died by people who realized there are terrible conflicts here and we've got to come up with some explanation for it, right?
Right.
But when you think about it logically, okay, if I'm a Trinitarian and I'm switching to oneness, I can't say that's progressive revelation. You know, I gotta say I'm switching from error to non-error, right? Or if I go from oneness back to Trinitarian, I can't say I'm that's not progressive revelation. That is,
right.
That is being enlightened to the truth, and what I thought before was an error, right? And so if William Branham preaches two contradictory things, it's not progressive revelation. It's one of those things has to be error, right? So he had to be preaching false doctrine. He had to be preaching false teachings, one way or the other, however you shake it. And it's really strategic, Charles, because it's not just that he flipped from one to the other. It depended on his audience. He would flip from Trinitarian to oneness, back to Trinitarian, back to oneness. And these ministers are aware that he did this, but by saying progressive revelation, they can make their deceived people, the people who are under their manipulation, not look at the fact that William Branham was flipping back and forth, and they think, oh, it's a clearer picture now. Yeah. And a lot of it, John, the sad truth is, it definitely was not progressive revelation. The sad, depressing truth for a lot of this is that William Branham was just getting mixed up about his library books. He forgot what book he used for what, and it was just sloppiness, right? These things were not core things he really believed down deep in his heart, right? And he would get mixed up over which book he used and what he had said before. And you know, when I think of all of the divorces and all of the broken homes and all of the destroyed lives, even the violence and suicide that have happened because of the fights and the divisions that occur between the sects of the message over this stuff, and it has been unending this for 50 years at least. Right? When I think of all of the terrible, destructive things that have happened because William Branham was a sloppy preacher who just couldn't keep what book to use straight, that makes me angry, John. It does. And William Branham absolutely bears a degree of responsibility for that because he's the one who preached all of this contradictory stuff. He's the one who laid the groundwork for the message to splinter into 100 different factions who all hate each other. Right? And the Bible says, don't everybody be a preacher because preachers are judged more strictly. And that is in part because preachers absolutely bear a degree of responsibility for the fallout of the things that they say and do that affect other people, right? William Branham bears that responsibility, both to the good and to the bad. And preachers who pretend like that's not true, you're not a good preacher. You need to stop preaching. You're dangerous, okay? You've got to start taking responsibility for the impact of the things that come out of your mouth. Message preachers don't like to do that, though. They do not like to be held accountable for anything. Nothing. Just like we see with all of these horrible things that have happened around the world in the message, John.
Yeah, and some of them, as we've clearly showed on the website, some of these men were criminals who were literally hiding behind pulpits. So it's really problematic that they're doing this.
Let me look at another example of William Branham claiming divine inspiration, John, for things he copied from other people. And serpent seed's another really good example. We talked about where that came from in prior episodes in a lot of detail. You can go back and listen to those episodes. But William Branham told us he got serpent seed as a divine revelation from God. And let me read you a quote to that effect. This is from The Rising of the Sun, 1965. William Branham said, "We've enjoyed these blessings, hearing those mysteries, serpent seed, and all these different questions has been completely revealed to us, not by man, but by God himself. Revealed by God himself. Divine revelation, not from man. But John, we went through extensive episodes showing where serpent seed was believed by many people before William Branham was even born.